Welcome to episode 146 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to share how to create self-care habits when you feel like you have no time. Visit truthforteachers.com to get the transcript and a free self-care habits planner. And if you enjoy this episode, leave a review for it on iTunes. This episode is brought to you in part by PeerGrade. It's a platform that makes it easy to facilitate peer review in your classroom. Students review each other's work, while PeerGrade takes care of anonymously assigning reviewers and delivering all the relevant insights to teachers. With PeerGrade, students learn how to think critically and take ownership of their learning, and they also learn how to write kind and useful feedback for their peers. The best part is that PeerGrade is free to use for teachers and students. To learn more, just visit thecornerstoneforteachers.com/peergrade. So we're talking today about self-care, and I'm wondering if this episode appealed to you because you feel like you are always putting everyone else's needs before your own. Maybe you feel like you never have enough time and energy for everything, and you only get what's left over in terms of time and energy, which isn't very much. Maybe you know that you need to prioritize self-care, but you just haven't been able to create habits that you can stick with. I think that a lack of time and energy is one of the biggest problems that teachers are facing. And as you know, if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, I've spent the last 3.5 years supporting teachers with work-life balance through the 40-hour Teacher Workweek Club. And to be honest with you, sometimes it really just gets me fired up because I see firsthand, day in and day out with these teachers, just how much they're having to do with so few resources and so little support. We're always hearing about do it for the kids. It's all about the kids. And it feels like, but who's taking care of the teachers? It's not hard to make the assumption that the only way to be successful as a teacher is to put your students' achievement before everything else in your life. If the kids, that is other people's kids, aren't your number one priority, if you're not working 24/7 for them, if you're not thinking about them every moment of the day and night, then you're somehow letting people down, or your students won't be as successful. This is the message that is passionately on my heart that I want to share with you today. There is no direct correlation between the number of hours that you work and your effectiveness as a teacher. We all know truly outstanding educators who prioritize time with their own families and they refuse to work nonstop. And we all know teachers who work 12, 15-hour days, but they're still teaching like it's 1984. Effective teaching is not about constantly working. It's about making sure that you are working on the right things. And once you start examining your habits and making sure that you're focused on things that are the best and highest use of your time, you will be able to make yourself a priority too. So I wanted to say that right up front, because if you don't see your own needs as being important, if you really think that you have to be working all the time in order to do a good job for kids, then you're never going to make time for self-care. It will always feel bad to you. It will always feel like it's a lesser use of your time, because when something is a priority, we find the time for it. If it's not a priority, we find an excuse not to do it. And as you'll discover through this episode, self-care doesn't have to be something that we're making excuses about not doing because it's expensive or complicated or time-consuming. It could be as simple as just 5-minute habits that are embedded into your day. I'm just advocating for simple little things that you can do all day long. Some of them only will take a minute or two. For example, instead of scrolling mindlessly through social media while you're making dinner, you can be listening to an uplifting podcast or music that you love. Instead of grading 2.5 papers while you're waiting for a doctor's appointment, you can spend a couple minutes reading a book by your favorite novelist. Instead of worrying about work while you're driving and rehashing all those negative interactions that you had with a student or a parent, you can be doing mindfulness practice or breathing exercises. Just enjoy that stillness. All of these kinds of things are considered self-care. It's not wasteful. It's non-selfish. Taking care of yourself means that you have more to give to your students. Staying up until 3 a.m. looking for the perfect lesson on Pinterest does not help you be energetic and in a good mood and present with your kids the next day when you actually implement that lesson. Kids benefit more from a healthy, happy, balanced teacher. I mean, they're stuck in a classroom with us 6 hours a day. Who would you rather be with? Someone who is well rested and has hobbies and enjoys her life? Or someone who hasn't had 3 minutes to herself in a month and a half and is completely exhausted and cranky? We all know this intuitively, right? And we've all heard the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. The tricky part is to turn that from a truism into a life principle, to stop just agreeing with it and actually live it. And the way to do that is through creating habits of self-care. The quality of your habits will determine the quality of your life. You will always be the last priority unless you have habits of self-care that are just woven into your daily routines, unless self-care is just a part of what you do. And that's why most of our attempts at self-care fail. We try to do one big nice thing for ourselves every now and then. And we expect that to tide us over for weeks afterward. You get that one breakfast in bed and a pedicure on Mother's Day, or one girls' night out every 6 months, and you hope that somehow that's going to be enough. But it doesn't work that way. What you do on a regular basis is far more important than what you do occasionally. Consistency is far more important than intensity. It's habits that create your lifestyle. There's no such thing as creating work-life balance once and for all. Your habits of self-care will determine your level of self-care. It's about your daily choices. And that's actually good news because it means that creating better habits is pretty simple once you understand what works for you. You can start today and start feeling better right away. So when you finish this episode, I want you to have chosen a very specific and actionable self-care habit for yourself. It's good to think about all the possibilities. So, you can think through lots of things that you would like to do eventually. But to make this sustainable and not just one more thing that you can't find time for, one more thing you feel guilty about not doing, I'm encouraging you to focus on just one, maybe 2 habits at a time. So as you're listening to this, if you're writing down or thinking about lots of ideas, that's fine. Just make sure it's with the intention to implement them later when you're ready and choose just one for now. So I really want to emphasize the importance of what we're doing here and why we're doing, because that's going to make the difference in terms of you feeling motivated enough to make this a priority. As long as self-care is just something that feels like it would be a nice thing to include, maybe it's not going to happen. You have to really believe that this is something that you need to do and that is possible for you. So I'm going to list some different categories of self-care now that might be useful for you to think about. I'm going to just list them all out first, and then we'll go back through and look at each one in detail and talk about specific examples. So your self-care habits could include morning rituals, midday breaks, nighttime rituals, rest and sleep habits, mental decompression, physical self-care, creative outlets and hobbies, and indulgences and luxuries. So those are some different things to sort of think about here. Let's break these down a little bit more and talk about what that might actually look like. If you always feel rushed in the morning, if you feel like people are making demands on you before you've even woken up, then you might like to think about a morning ritual of self-care, something that will allow you to have even just 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes to yourself so that you can mentally prepare for the day. I've shared before in the podcast how I did not used to be a morning person, but I started getting up 15 minutes earlier. I did that back in 2008, and I'm telling you, it changed my entire life. I will sit outside if the weather permits, I'll have a cup of coffee, and I'll just breathe or read or just mentally prepare for the day, just get my head right. So if you feel like your day just always gets off to a bad start, think about morning self-care. Could you set your alarm even 5 minutes earlier and do something for yourself in the morning that feels good and sets the right tone for the day? Another self-care habit that you might want to think about is a midday break. Something that you do for yourself during the school day so that you don't feel like you're just going nonstop from sun up to sundown. So this could be something like a 3-minute dance break after lunch with the kids, or 1 minute of deep breathing and relaxation exercise, either during your lunch break or maybe when students are dismissed. Maybe you want to listen to uplifting music or relaxing spa music in the car on the way home from work. Or maybe you want to just sit for 5 minutes and have a cup of cappuccino when you get home in the afternoons. None of these kind of midday breaks will take you longer than a couple minutes, not a single one of them. And they can re-energize you for hours afterward if you pick something that works for your personality and needs. There's no right or wrong here. Maybe your midday break needs to come much earlier in the day, around 11 or 12. Maybe it's right after school when you get home from school. Just because you're home from work doesn't mean now that your day is done. You still got a lot of other responsibilities for. What kind of break can you create in there for yourself? Just a couple minutes of self-care to kind of help you transition from one thing to the next and have the energy that you need to finish out the day's tasks. Maybe your habit of self-care will be a nighttime ritual. So these are good for people who feel like they're not getting any time for themselves until the whole family is in bed. And by that point, they're too exhausted to really do anything. They just kind of collapse into bed themselves. So if you feel that way and you know that rest and sleep is a big thing for you, maybe you want to shift around your tasks so that you can head to bed a little bit earlier and have 30 minutes to lay there and read or watch your shows without cutting into your bedtime. Or maybe just creating a habit of taking a hot bath or a shower right before bed would help you wind down. Think about something that you can do there in the evening. I did a podcast episode, a coaching call last season where I talked with a teacher about, how she felt like she was just doing things right up until bedtime. And we talked about moving some of those tasks earlier in the evening. Brush your teeth, wash your face, pick up around the house, make the coffee for the next morning. All those little tasks that you might ordinarily be doing immediately before bed, do them earlier. Do them right after dinner, and then you can truly relax for the rest of the evening. Or at least, hopefully, have 5 to 10 minutes where you can just chill out a little bit and not feel like you're racing around the house getting things done and then suddenly just collapsing into bed. Have some sort of routine there in the evening that allows you to decompress and relax. So you might want to create some sort of sleep and rest habit there. So that's a nighttime ritual, and you might want to extend that into some sort of rest and sleep habit. If you are always physically tired and you're just falling into bed at night, make it your goal to create a habit of X amount of hours of sleep each night. Maybe you're trying to work your way up to 7. Start with 5 or 6, move your way up slowly. Or instead of forcing yourself to stay in motion for 18 hours straight every day, schedule in 15 minutes in the late afternoon to lie down and take a rest or a nap. Your self-care habit could also be centered around something on mental and emotional decompressing. So these kind of self-care habits are really crucial if you feel like you can never turn off your teacher brain. If your mind is always like a hamster on a treadmill, think about mental or emotional decompressing self-care habits. So this could be setting aside a specific time of day for meditation or prayer, yoga, mindfulness practice, something like that. You might want to create a curfew for social media and don't allow yourself to look at it or check email after a certain time. So maybe none before noon on the weekends or nothing after 8 p.m. You can create a self-care habit of no schoolwork on the weekends. That might be another self-care habit for mental and emotional decompressing. You might even want to give yourself permission to relax by scheduling in time for doing nothing. Put nothing on your to-do list for a certain block of time and practice not being productive, not going constantly until it feels natural and not like a waste of time. So consider some of these ways that you can mentally and emotionally decompress. And it could be much simpler than that. It just could be 2 minutes in your car before you drive off, before you go into the house, whatever it is that you're doing to just center yourself a little bit. Just take in the silence, think about what needs to be done, have that moment of gratitude and presence, and then go on with your day. Maybe your new self-care habit will be related to physical self-care. So this is the way to go if your body is manifesting physical symptoms of stress, and you know that you need to get healthy in a way that will feel good to you. So maybe your new self-care habit will be learning to prepare healthy, delicious meals instead of always just grabbing takeout. Or maybe it will be getting fresh air and sunshine for, let's say, 10 minutes a day. Maybe it's doing something physical you enjoy, like Pilates or dance or tennis. Physical self-care is great too. And again, doesn't have to be all the time. If you can just fit in little bits of it, that works. You don't have to have this 2-hour time block where you can go to the gym. Walk around the block. Just taking a 5-minute walk for me really makes a big difference. Gets the blood flowing, opens the mind back up. It's great for you. So don't make it into a bigger deal than it has to be. Remember that the consistency is more important than intensity. So it doesn't have to be something big that you do every now and then. Look for something small you can do regularly. A few more ideas for your self-care habit. It could center around creative outlets and hobbies. And this is a good one to pick if you feel like you just don't feel like yourself unless you get to spend regular time on something that you love. So maybe you are an artist and you just need to paint, or you're a writer, you need to write. Whatever your hobby is, if that's really essential to your identity and to you feeling whole and complete, that might be the self-care habit that you need to pick. So maybe you'll carve out 2 hours a week for your favorite hobby. Maybe you'll get up 30 minutes early to work on it. Maybe you'll just spend time exploring nature for an hour a week. Whatever it is that you really need in terms of your creative outlet, that might be a good focus. And then finally, your self-care habit could be something that feels like an indulgence or a luxury. So if you really love the finer things in life, but you feel like you spend all your time and money on other people and on things that you need instead of things that you want, pick one thing that you will gift to yourself on a regular basis. Like maybe it's a mani-pedi, something like that. Something that will lessen that feeling you have about always sacrificing your own wants. Now, this is not my favorite type of self-care habit because it requires more resources, and it's not something that you can get on a daily or necessarily even weekly basis. But for some people, this is a really important part of self-care, to feel like they do something that is really just truly an indulgence for themselves. So that might be where you want to start. Now, I'm guessing you would probably like to choose one habit from each of those categories, and you can do that eventually. But starting today, we're going to focus on just one habit, or maybe a pair of complementary habits. It's two things that sort of like go together and make sense together. You don't want to try to do too much at once, because if you do, then you'll be right back where you started. And a couple weeks from now, you will feel like, oh my gosh, I just let these habits go. I was a little overambitious and now I'm not doing anything for self-care again. You can always add more later. But this first self-care habit that you are adding for yourself, and if you already have some self-care habits, if you're adding just one new thing, make sure that that thing fits two important criteria. Number one, it needs to be something that you want to maintain permanently. Remember that we're not going for quick fixes here. Although you can tweak your self-care habit for your needs over time, this needs to be something that you can stick with and make a regular part of your life. Otherwise, it will never happen. It will just be a self-care treat and not really a self-care habit. So pick something that you want to keep doing on a long-term basis. And second of all, make sure that your habit is something that has a meaningful impact on your well-being. Choose something that will make you feel happier and more rested or more productive. Don't just pick whatever sounds easiest or fun. You want this self-care habit to be something that will really take a weight off of your shoulders. Something that will really give you a real sense of satisfaction, to feel like I am prioritizing myself. I am taking time to re-energize or rest or whatever it is that I need. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be meaningful to you. And if you want help planning this, I have a free guide that I can give you. It lists all these categories of self-care, and it provides space for you to brainstorm and reflect on what you would like your habit to be. So if you want to get that, just go to thecornerstoneforteachers.com/self-care habits. And that's all one word, cornerstoneforteachers.com/self-care habits. And you can get that free planner there to help you think through what kind of habits you want. Your takeaway truth for the week ahead is this: self-care isn't selfish. It is integral to your ability to continue caring for others. If you want to be the best version of yourself, you have to prioritize your own needs, and you can do that through simple habits throughout your day. Have a great week. You can do this. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. Want more than just a weekly podcast episode from me? I'd love to also send you a weekly message of encouragement via email. I'll reach out each Sunday evening with a short message that's designed to help you feel more prepared and inspired and motivated for the week ahead. It's not a newsletter or a bunch of announcements. This goes out to over 85,000 educators. So I put just as much thought into crafting this weekly written message to my email list as I do into crafting my podcast episodes. And it's entirely unique content that you won't find anywhere else online. Just go to thecornerstoneforteachers.com/subscribe and you can sign up. That's thecornerstoneforteachers.com/subscribe.